Hey there, and welcome. Have you ever wondered how we actually know if an economy is doing well or not so well? You might think it's this super complex thing, but it's a lot like a doctor checking a patient's vitals. Economists have their own special tools to measure, diagnose, and even treat an economy. And today, we're going to open up that toolkit. So, how do you take an economy's pulse? That's the big question, right? And that's exactly what we're going to tackle. We're going to dive into the key methods, the same ones you'd see in AP macroeconomics, for giving a country a full economic checkup. Okay, first things first, the checkup. To get a really clear picture of what's happening, economists focus on three main vital signs. You can think of them as checking the economy's overall strength, the health of its workforce, and maybe even its temperature. And the first, most important vital sign is gross domestic product, or GDP for short. This is the big one. It's basically the price tag on everything, and I mean everything, a country produces in a single year. It's the broadest look we can get at a country's economic muscle. So how do they even calculate a number that huge? Well, they use what's called the expenditure approach, which all boils down to a pretty simple formula. It just adds up all the spending. C is for consumption. That's all the stuff you and I buy. I is for investment from businesses. G is for government spending. And that last part, net exports, is just what we sell to other countries minus what we buy from them. Add it all up, and boom, you've got GDP. Now, this is super important. Not everything gets counted. GDP only tracks the final goods. Why? To avoid counting the same thing twice. So they don't count the steel that goes into a car, but they do count the finished car. And other stuff gets left out too, like buying stocks and bonds, illegal stuff, or all the unpaid work people do at home. All right, on to our second vital sign, the unemployment rate. This one tells us a story about the people, the workforce. And it's not just anyone without a job. To be counted as unemployed, you have to be actively looking for work, but can't find it. You know, it's also key to understand that not all unemployment is created equal. There's frictional unemployment, which is just the normal, healthy turnover of people moving between jobs. Then there's structural, which is more serious. It's when jobs disappear because of technology or big industry shifts. But the one economists really worry about is cyclical unemployment. That's the kind that shoots up when the whole economy is in a downturn. And our third vital sign is inflation. Think of this as taking the economy's temperature. We measure it using something called the Consumer Price Index, or CPI. The government basically creates a shopping basket filled with stuff an average family buys. We're talking milk, gas, clothes, you name it. Then they just track how the total price of that basket changes. If the price tag gets bigger, that's inflation. Okay, quick recap. We've taken the vitals: GDP, unemployment, and inflation. So now it's time for the diagnosis. Using these numbers, we can figure out if the economy is in good shape, if it's kind of sluggish, or if it might be running a fever. You see, all economies have this natural rhythm called the business cycle. It's a constant wave. They grow and expand until they hit a peak, then they naturally start to contract, that's a recession, until they hit the bottom or a trough, and then the whole process starts over again. These ups and downs are totally normal. So what's the diagnosis when things go wrong? Well, there are two main illnesses. On one hand, you've got a recessionary gap. That's when the economy is sick with high unemployment, and it's just not producing as much as it could be. On the other hand, you can have an inflationary gap. That's when the economy is overheating, running too hot, and producing more than it can sustain, which causes high inflation. So, once we have a diagnosis, what's next? Well, it's time for a prescription. When the economy is sick, the government has a medical bag full of tools it can use to help out. And that whole treatment plan? It's called fiscal policy. And fiscal policy? It's actually pretty straightforward when you get down to it. It's all about the government changing just two things: how much it spends and how much it taxes. These are the two big levers it can pull to either hit the gas or pump the brakes on the economy. So, what's the prescription for a recession? It's something called expansionary fiscal policy. The treatment is simple. The government either starts spending more money itself, maybe on new roads or bridges, or it cuts our taxes, leaving more money in our pockets to spend. The goal is to inject cash into the system and get things moving again. But what if the economy is overheating and inflation is the problem? Well, then the doctor prescribes the exact opposite: contractionary policy. Here, the government cuts back on its spending, or it raises taxes. The whole point is to pull money out of the system to help it cool down and get those prices under control. Now, how well does this medicine actually work?
That depends on something with a fancy name, the marginal propensity to consume, or MPC. All it means is, if I give you an extra dollar, how much of it are you going to go spend versus how much you'll save? If your MPC is zero point 0.8, it just means you'll spend 80 cents of that new dollar.
And that MPC idea is the key to unlocking something really powerful, the spending multiplier. The best way to think about it is like a ripple effect in a pond. When the government spends a dollar, that becomes someone's income. They spend a piece of it, which becomes income for someone else, who then spends a piece of that, and that $1's impact just multiplies as it moves through the economy. And this is where you see the real power. Let's say people spend 80 cents of every new dollar they get, so the MPC is 0.8. The multiplier in that case is 5. So a $10 billion boost from the government doesn't just add $10 billion to the economy. No way. It ripples out to create a total impact of $50 billion. It's a massive amplifier. But just like with any powerful medicine, fiscal policy is not a miracle cure. The prognosis, or the likely outcome, always has to factor in some pretty serious side effects and tricky trade-offs. It's never as simple as just writing a prescription. Here are the 3 big ones. First, things are slow. There are time lags. It can take ages to even realize there's a problem, then to pass a law, and then for the money to actually get out there and work. Second, there's something called crowding out. When the government borrows a ton of money, it can drive up interest rates, making it harder for private businesses to invest. And finally, of course, all this can lead to deficit spending and a ballooning national debt. Which brings up a really good question. I mean, if we have these tools to fight unemployment, why not just, get rid of it completely? Well, it turns out there's a catch, and it's one of the most famous trade-offs in all of economics. The answer is something called the short-run Phillips curve, and it basically shows that, at least in the short term, you can't have your cake and eat it too. If you use policy to push unemployment way down, you're probably going to get higher inflation as a side effect. And if you try to crush inflation, you might cause unemployment to go up. It's a constant balancing act. But, and this is a big but, that trade-off doesn't last forever. In the long run, economists believe the Phillips curve is vertical. What that tells us is that over time, the economy kind of settles back to its natural rate of unemployment, no matter how high inflation gets. Trying to force unemployment below that natural rate doesn't work long term. It just gives you more and more inflation. So, we end on this big final thought. Is the economy a patient that can basically heal itself if we just leave it alone and give it time? Or does it need a doctor, the government, constantly intervening to keep it healthy? This is the central debate in macroeconomics, and honestly, it's a question people are still trying to answer today.